This video is going to be on getting MySQL, PHP and Nginx installed using Choco. Choco is a PowerShell based package manager. The first step we're going to take is run a terminal as an administrator. So this assumes that you've got admin rights and you can easily do this. So go into your terminal and type in Choco install. Now you do need Git if you're working with VS Code. You might have to enter VS Code, you might have to do Nginx, PHP and Composer. So you're going to need all these packages to successfully develop on Windows. So what you do is just enter all that with Choco. Choco installation instructions and everything is here at chocolatey.org, and just click on install, and then you'll get the information that you need and the instructions on how to install it. Now, as you install everything, you'll get some verbose output, but it's pretty much a command line utility that just makes things a lot easier. So you'll be installing things with Choco, and then they will place themselves generally into the tools directory of C. So at the moment we've only got MySQL. So while we're waiting for the installation to complete, let's create a development directory in our root of our C drive. And once we have everything installed, just have a look. We've got Nginx. Now we need PHP is still to come, and Composer as well. So it might take a little while to install, and as you can see, the return value of 0 tells you it was successful for the previous one. And now we've got our PHP 8.2 environment being installed, and finally Composer. So we've got everything. You might notice that when you first try to use things it doesn't work, so it's a good idea to restart your terminal. And it doesn't always have to be an administrative terminal, but because you might want to restart services while you're configuring things, it's a good idea to run it as an administrator. So we'll get another administrative terminal up, and we were going into dev to create a CakePHP project, and the new terminal is really cool because it's got this autocomplete, so it's a lot easier, it's a lot more like Linux. So we're going to install a CakePHP project. Notice our first error message here really says, okay, can't do it because I'm missing some extensions. So this intl. So let's go into our tools directory, into our PHP folder, and get our code editor here, and then open up php.ini, and we might do a search for the extension that was being complained about. So intl. Now there's a lot of different options here to uncomment extensions. If you want to do image processing and a few other things, you'll want to uncomment these things, but what we're concerned about is the MySQL extension. We're going to be using SQLite for the debug kit. It uses an SQLite database, and if we continue to look, curl's already uncommented, so that's what we'll use for Composer as well. And then we need zip for our Composer as well. It will complain if that's not available either. So now let's try going back to dev and installing project 1 and remove it because it failed first time. And then let's try it now, and it should work successfully because it's no longer missing an INTL extension. So now we have a CakePHP installation to target with Nginx. We want to say yes to create the directories and set their permissions. And we've got CakePHP. Now we need to configure PHP. Now what we need to do is get a CGI instance running and listening on a port so Nginx can pass PHP requests to it. So to do that, we download from this GitHub page. It's the service wrapper, Windows service wrapper, and we can download this Windows service wrapper 64-bit instance, and then it just comes down. It's only 17 meg. And then what we need to do with that is we need to go to our users, and I think it's JA, there we go, and downloads and WinSW. And what we're going to do is move that to here, but we're going to call it php-cgi.exe. And when you run that, if you do, it will, if I say install, it will complain about a missing service definition file. So that's the next thing we want to do. This executable will install a service which will allow us to run php-cgi.exe as a service listening on a certain port. So now we need to create this php-cgi service XML file, and I have some code here. Go to the WinSW GitHub page to learn more about this. But what you can do is go File, New Text File, paste that in, and now we need to put it in here. So we go File, Save As, and we want to save it as a php-cgi XML file. So hopefully that will be right, which it is. And then what we can do, once we've got that file there, we can say, oh, okay, it doesn't exist as a service, so we need to install it. And now that it exists, it will pick up the service.xml file and insert that as a service into the registry. And then it's a simple matter of choosing to start the service, and that should be working nicely there. So now we've got the PHP service running in the background there. Now from there we need to now configure our Nginx instance. So we might close this and go upper directory into Nginx and open code in there. And Nginx.exe, the paths in the configuration files are relative to this. So when we go in here and we go nginx.conf, we can see that at the moment it's serving files out of this HTML directory, so relative to Nginx. So what we want to do is we want to make this CakePHP enabled. So if we go and do a Google for CakePHP 4 installation, we can find in the navigation an Nginx configuration that we might be able to modify. So let's do that. So copy our Nginx configuration here. We might completely replace this server block, and then we need to make some changes. Now we're developing locally, so the server name's localhost. Now our root is where our CakePHP installation is. So what's that one again? It's in dev and project 1. So this is the root of our project, but we also want to put a web root on it as well, and we need to put forward slashes instead of backslashes as well. Now when we look in our Nginx directory, we can see that the logs folder is named logs, and it's access an error in there. So this we need to modify, and we want to say, okay, it's relative to the Nginx binary. So we just delete all these bits and just update our access and error logs. And now this is something that we can change. We can say, okay, if there is args, that's a nice to have. It will just replace the question mark, so it's not hard coded. So if there's no arguments, then, or query string, then it won't show a question mark as well. Now the rest of it here is pretty much right, but what we do need to do, and we'll just actually trigger this so that you can see the error message which is caused by not having it. Let's enter localhost, and we do definitely need to go restart service and restart Nginx. If that's worked, we should get a bad gateway. Now, bad gateway simply means that Nginx tried to pass a PHP request to a php-cgi instance, but it couldn't. And so to figure that one out, I've forgotten PHP, and let's have a look at our php-cgi service XML. So it's 4 nines instead of 9,000. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. Save it. Restart our service, and then if everything's correct, we should now have it correct. Now we've still got an issue here that we're not connected to the database, so you might need to now, like you could do this with MySQL Workbench, but just doing it from show databases, we've already got database posts, we've already got a database, but we can also, let's recreate it, and that's correct. Now just the location of our data directory is in program data MySQL data. So if that's where the database are kept on a Windows machine installed using Choco. So once that's done, we've got a database connected. Now we need to, let's close this and go to our project, open it up in code, and then go into config, and app.local. We don't always need to use this format, so we can just comment that all out, and it might be just easiest to do MySQL root, and it could be a password. If you had a password, it'd be like this, but we don't have a password, so it's root at 127 to localhost. We can even write that in localhost, and then post database. Now that should be enough now, using the DSN format, to give us our connection to our database. Now one thing that you might want to do is develop out, you might have a dev, you might have a prod, and they might all be on the same server. So let's just have a look at serving CakePHP out of a subdirectory. Now there's some code here which shows us how to do that. So we've got location is subdir, and then we've got 3 different blocks that makes everything work together. So let's copy that into our Nginx configuration. So we've got to go tools, Nginx, code, open our nginx.conf. Now this time we've already got it working out of root, but perhaps we might want to make a cake instance work out of a subdirectory. And we know currently that our root is this, but let's also do the same thing. We're going to serve it out of a subdirectory. Notice the alias here. This is different to root. Nginx command, but it's vital to make this work. So whenever we drop into the subdirectory, this is what we'll be doing. We'll be serving things slightly different. Notice this is document root and then php-cgi script name, and this one has a different request file name. And we need to double check that we're passing back correctly to the correct port number as well. And finally, so what we've got this try files. It's going to try for a physical file, a directory, and then if it doesn't match anything, it's going to jump to this subdir location, and then it's going to rewrite everything so that it will talk to the Nginx.PHP front-end controller. And then finally, if you don't request a directory with a trailing slash, it will rewrite it as well to give it a trailing slash. So now that that's done, we need to restart our service, and let's have a look if it worked. So it's subdir, which we're trying to connect to. So let's have a look, subdir. Now you notice when I remove the trailing slash, what we'll do, it will, and even what we could do is just do an inspection, go to the network tab, just clear everything, and notice what it does when I press enter there, and you can see it quite nicely. It does a 301, whoops, it does a 301 redirect. I don't know what I just did then. Well, let's try that again. So go back up. So yeah, so we hit a 301 redirect, which is response. 301 moved permanently, and then it does a get from the correct location. And we have our CakePHP working from a subdirectory. Now this is all well and good, but it doesn't give you XDebug. So let's now look at XDebug. I'm just going to close our editor here and go into our project again and launch it. And finally, when we have a look at our terminal here within Windows, we go to PHP-v, we notice we don't have anything in the XDebug range. So what we need to do, so we've got the XDebug downloads here, and then we've got a bunch of different options for Windows binary. So which one do we select? Well, we know we're running, if we have a look, we're running 8.2, but this one's the non-type safe version, and so we really need to pay attention to the version and whether it's type safe or not. And then when we look at here, we can find that there's TS versions, type safe versions, but we don't want that. We want the VS16 8.2, keep it and download that, show it in the folder, and then we want to go, we want to copy that and then move it to our C tools PHP extension directory, and then we want to paste it in, and this one particularly has got a download counter on it, so we'll just remove that, and then we'll copy the name of the file, and we need to go into our, let's just open it using our Explorer here, C tools PHP, go find php.ini, and I've just gone too far, and then come back to, right, and again find, right, so what we're looking for is our extensions block, and here we got extensions, but what we're looking to do is we want to use a Zend extension this time, and just everything, we'd strip the PHP underscore off, and it's in the extension directory, so it should now work fine. So if I go now PHP-v, you can see we've got XDebug working and available. Now in our extensions here, we have to make sure in PHP, not PHP, code, that we have the XDebug extension installed, and then it will say, okay, to get me working, there's a lot of different information here, but here's the secret source. So it's we want to put these configuration items into our php-ini. Let's go right to the bottom. Might create a code block here, and don't know if it will let me copy. I think I just went past it. Maybe go back up again. Yeah, that's for, and then copy. Let's see if this works. And no. So paste, nope. So we can do that manually. We can say xdebug mode is xdebug start with request equals yes. Let's just make sure that's correct. Xdebug start with request. Very good. So that should be enough to get started with debugging. Let's see if we can do that. Now, at the moment, it doesn't have any options that we need, so we want to create a launch JSON. PHP. Alright, we've selected it. That looks pretty good. Listen for xdebug. Now we can, and then we can just test it if we want to by opening up a file that we know is going to be hit by a request. Let's just do the bootstrap file and put a breakpoint maybe here, and then run listen with xdebug, and let's see if it gets hit when we try and access our application. Now it should work, but it just doesn't seem to be working at the moment, and the reason for that, probably, if we just go back to tools, php-ini, is that we need to go php-cgi service.exe, and we want to restart that because we've made changes to php-ini and it's probably stale. Now let's try that again and see if it works. Sorry, I clicked in the wrong spot. Now you can see how it's pausing, and if we go back to our editor, we can see that we've now got the ability to debug, step through our code using XDebug on Windows 11. So hopefully this will be useful to people that are using Windows 11 and Windows operating system to develop on CakePHP. So we hope that it's useful to someone.